Haldane's damning Reeves verdict. When a former Bank of England chief economist tells you that the government has been dealt a bad hand and played it pretty poorly, that's not constructive criticism. That's a professional saying you've messed up in ways that experts find genuinely concerning. Andy Haldane just delivered one of the most damning assessments of Rachel Reeves' economic management you're likely to hear from someone of his stature, accusing the government of making repeated mistakes that are sucking all life from the economy. And the really brutal part? He's saying these aren't just one-off errors. They're the same mistakes being made over and over again, which suggests either the Chancellor isn't learning or she's trapped in a doom loop she can't escape from. So buckle up, because we're about to dissect why one of Britain's most respected economists has essentially said Rachel Reeves is killing economic growth through her own incompetence, why the build-up to her budget has been a circus that's damaging the economy, and whether there's any way she can turn this around before Britain's economic prospects are completely flatlined. This is the kind of expert verdict that should terrify any chancellor, and it's landing less than a week before the budget that's supposed to fix everything. Right, let's start with who Andy Haldane is, because his credentials matter here. He was chief economist at the Bank of England until 2021, which means he's one of the most qualified people in Britain to assess economic policy and government performance. When someone like that speaks, markets listen, businesses pay attention, and governments should probably take notes. He's not a political partisan throwing around criticism for headlines. He's a serious economist with decades of experience saying the government is fundamentally mismanaging the economy. His assessment, delivered on Sky News' Mornings with Ridge and Frost, was brutal in its simplicity. He said the government has been dealt a bad hand, which acknowledges they inherited challenges from the Conservatives, but then immediately followed up by saying they've played it pretty poorly. That's the economic expert equivalent of saying, yes, things were difficult, but you've somehow made them worse through your own choices. It's a devastating 1-2 punch that gives no credit while acknowledging the context. But Haldane didn't stop there. He emphasized that mistakes have been made, and crucially, they're repeated mistakes. That word repeated is doing enormous work in that sentence, because it transforms the criticism from you messed up to you keep messing up in the same ways and apparently aren't learning from experience. That's not just incompetence, that's a pattern of behavior that suggests fundamental problems with how the government approaches economic policy. The specific mistake Haldane identifies is the black hole narrative that he says has been sucking all life or energy and light from the economy. He's referring to the constant talk about fiscal crises and gaps in public finances that have dominated both the buildup to this budget and the October fiscal speech. And his point is absolutely crucial. By constantly talking about how terrible everything is and how much money needs to be found, the government creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, where business confidence collapses, investment dries up, and economic growth stalls. Think about it from a business perspective. If you're considering investing in the UK, expanding your operations, or hiring more staff, and all you hear from the government is doom and gloom about fiscal black holes and the need for tax rises, what do? You hold off. You wait. You see what happens. And when millions of businesses and investors make that same rational decision to wait, the economy slows down. That's what Haldane means by sucking all life from the economy. The comparison to Keir Starmer's promise to tread more lightly on our lives is particularly cutting. That was a specific pledge made just 16 months ago, a commitment that the Labour government would be less intrusive, less heavy-handed than its predecessors. Haldane's assessment that has singularly not happened is about as definitive a rejection of that promise as you can get. He's saying not only has the government failed to deliver on that pledge, they've done the exact opposite. And the proof, according to Haldane, is in the speculation and circus surrounding the budget. When every move is trailed in the media, when businesses are left guessing about what's coming, when the entire economic conversation is dominated by uncertainty and crisis narratives, you're not treading lightly, you're stomping all over economic confidence and growth prospects. Haldane's call for an overhaul of the budget process to prevent damaging leaks is significant because it addresses a systemic problem. The current system, where major policy announcements get leaked or briefed out in advance, creates uncertainty and allows speculation to run rampant. That's terrible for economic stability because businesses and investors hate uncertainty even more than they hate high taxes. At least with high taxes, you know where you stand. With constant leaks and speculation, nobody knows what's coming, so everybody plays it safe. Now, let's talk about the economic data that's providing the context for all this criticism, because the numbers are genuinely concerning. Economic growth slowed to just 0.1% in the third quarter, down from 0.3% in the previous quarter, and worse than most economists predicted. That's not just disappointing, that's stagnation territory. Britain's economy is barely moving, and the direction of travel is downward. Rachel Reeves tried to blame this on specific factors, like the Jaguar Land Rover production shutdown following their cyber attack, with GDP actually declining by 0.1% in September because of disruption in manufacturing. And yes, that cyber attack did have an impact, but here's the problem with that defense. One-off events like cyber attacks might explain a bad month, but they don't explain a broader pattern of slowing growth and declining business confidence. Blaming JLR is like blaming your poor test score on a paper cut when you didn't study for weeks. The really concerning part is the trajectory. Growth was 0.3% in the second quarter, it's now 0.1% in the third quarter. That's not volatility, that's a trend. And if that trend continues, Britain's heading for recession territory where negative growth becomes the norm rather than the exception. That's the context in which Haldane is delivering his criticism, an economy that's slowing down under Labour's management despite their promises to deliver growth. The income tax U-turn adds another layer of chaos to this whole situation. Reeves was expected to raise income tax rates to fill the gap in her spending plans, and as recently as Monday, she was hinting that the alternative would be deep cuts to public investment. That's classic political framing. Either we raise your taxes or we have to slash spending on things you care about. It's designed to make tax rises seem like the responsible choice. But then she ditched the plan entirely, breaking what would have been a clear manifesto promise. The official explanation is that improved forecasting from the Office for Budget Responsibility gave her more fiscal headroom, which is convenient timing if you believe it. The cynical interpretation is that she realized the political cost of breaking that manifesto promise would be too high, so she's scrambling to find other ways to raise the money without technically breaking the promise. And that brings us back to Haldane's criticism about repeated mistakes and the crisis narrative. If Reeves had proper fiscal discipline and a clear economic strategy, she wouldn't be U-turning on major tax decisions days before the budget. She wouldn't be creating uncertainty about what's in the budget through constant leaks and speculation. She wouldn't be talking about black holes and crises that suck the life from economic confidence. But she's doing all of those things, which is why Haldane's criticism lands so hard. The phrase, "not enough has been done to give growth a chance," is particularly damning because growth is supposed to be Labour's main economic priority. They've talked endlessly about being the party of growth, about breaking Britain out of stagnation, about creating economic opportunities. But if a former Bank of England chief economist is saying you're not giving growth a chance, you're failing at your primary objective. That's not just missing targets, that's failing at the fundamental mission you set for yourself. What makes this all worse is that Reeves and Labour had political space to make bold choices when they came into government. They had a massive majority, public goodwill from winning the election, and time before the next election to implement difficult policies and let them work. Instead, they've squandered that space through indecision, U-turns, constant crisis narratives, and the kind of chaotic communication that destroys business confidence. The budget next week is now make or break for Reeves's credibility. If she can deliver something that restores confidence, provides clarity, and gives businesses reason to invest, maybe she can start to turn this around. But if it's more of the same, more black hole narratives, more last-minute U-turns, more leaked proposals that create uncertainty, then Haldane's criticism will look prophetic and Reeves's position as Chancellor will become increasingly untenable. The comparison to previous chancellors is instructive. When economic experts started openly criticizing Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget, he was gone within weeks. When George Osborne faced criticism for his austerity approach, he at least had the defense that he was consistently following a clear strategy. Reeves is being criticized for not having a coherent approach, for making the same mistakes repeatedly, and for actively harming growth through poor communication and crisis narratives. That's potentially more damaging than having a controversial policy that you stick to.